Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the host and the founder of the Rise Above Justice Movement and the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. Today, I'll give a viewer discretion is advised due to the nature of the topics that we will be discussing. All right, so I'm so inspired by this human being that I'm getting ready to bring on. And this is somebody that reached out and was like, hey, let's collaborate. And I was like, yes, why the hell not? Absolutely. And then looking through the profile, I see this beautiful human being that has a voice, that has a story, and deserves to be amplified because all of us have unique voices. We all have unique stories. And today I am joined by Burhan. Burhan, welcome to the
Yes.
podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the kind words, wonderful introduction. Super excited to get started.
Yeah. So, first of all, let everybody know what pronouns you use.
I use they, them pronouns.
Okay, perfect. And let's dive in and talk about, where your journey began. Walk us through your just walk us through who you are. Give yourself an introduction, and then we'll do some deep dives into different parts of your story.
Definitely. I feel like my journey began even before I was born, even before I was even conceived. My grandparents moved from India to Pakistan during the partition, and my dad was actually one of the first in his family to move from a village where my granddad had settled to a small town in Rawalpindi, Islamabad area. And I had the most wonderful honor of being born and raised in Rawalpindi. The houses, the neighborhood, the culture that raised me is somebody that I am today. And I pay a lot of my tribute to my upbringing. Like, of course, there was a lot of challenges. Of course, there were barriers to things, but I do miss my hometown in Pakistan and the upbringing and how it shaped me where I am today. So I came to US about like 7.5 years ago. I'm about to complete my 8 years. So wow, quite a time. I was always a kid who's, catwalking in the classroom. I always had this passion to be the runway diva, and that essentially brought me and empowered me to move from school to school on scholarship. Um, Growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of hate, so my attention really was focused on my community work, getting financially independent, and getting straight A's, and moving from school to school on scholarships, and eventually graduating from a school that I could have never gone to if it was due to my parents' income status. Yeah, so that's a quick about my journey. I have been involved in a lot of social initiatives globally. I have run startup programs across East Africa. I have done campaigns for some really beautiful organizations, and I'm really involved in community organizing. So that's a quick introduction about myself.
Yeah, and a lot of the work that you do is inspired by your experiences in the nonprofit spaces, but also just being you, right? And I'm imagining, based off what I see on social media, I'm imagining the catwalk. I'm imagining you on like a reality TV show at some point. I know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, right? But you also run your own initiative, and I want you to kind of like dive in and talk about that a little bit. What led you to creating the initiative that you currently do? I'm blanking on the name. Why can I not think of it? Innovation, right?
Definitely. So when I was in Pakistan and I mentioned the high school I went to, it was a very elite high school. A lot of people ask me, what is the first culture shock you ever felt? And I tell them, the first culture shock for me was not coming to US. The first culture shock to me was going to that high school because I saw children of bureaucrats, army officials, people coming with drivers, people coming with their bodyguards. It was a kind of Pakistan I was never exposed to, and the kind of privilege I saw. And then my bullies were rebranded as humanitarians instantly due to access to expensive counselors. Entire businesses existed whose entire job was to create profiles for students when they are applying for Ivy League schools and colleges abroad. So being in that environment really shaped my perspective on how systems work, how class mobility is manufactured, how applications are manufactured, and how that flows into academic industrial complex, the nonprofit industrial complex, the startups, and all these industrial complexes. So when I came to US, I was initially really focused on just my academics, but then as the pandemic came and I went back to Pakistan, my school closed. I felt like I was very lonely. I was hiding behind achievements. I was hiding behind accolades, but essentially I had no friends. I feel like I was hiding a truth inside me. And that led to me just telling my story via social media. And I instantly saw reaching a community I never knew existed. I never knew like you could be out and proud and live your life in ways that can inspire other people. And that continued, to inspire me to just present myself, experiment with my gender. So I borrowed a camera from my college media center and started taking pictures of myself and telling my stories. And as my backlash increased back home, the death threats increased to me and my family. I started telling that part of my story through my photo shoots. Um, Eventually when I graduated, as a STEM person, you're living a life on installment because you're living on a visa, and your stay in the US is attached to your visa. So my first job was in product management, but I was doing so many other initiatives on the side, and I was looking for escape. I was looking for a way where I don't have to live these different lives, one for the corporate, one for my social justice initiative, where I could just be myself. And that what led me to my job in the nonprofit ecosystem. And as I explored the ecosystem more, I was like, how is that? How are 501(c)(3)s different from corporate when the mobility is really shaping the interests of the wealthy and elite class? And as the genocide in Palestine started, that was the eye-opening moment for my activism because in a lot of LGBTQ boards I was serving, they could not have a conversation about it. They could not hold a conversation about it. I saw entire movements failing. And that exposed to me how those systems were built on elitist principles to begin with. So, for example, in Boston, we had Boston Pride for the People being protested by hundreds of queer and trans youth. We have Trans Community of New England, an organization that has been running for more than 50 years, being protested by queer and trans people for lacking class consciousness because I can't afford a price ticket of $500 to go to a conference. Of course, many people cannot afford that, right? But a lot of our trans organizations are right now catered towards providing these elite services that only focus on very few. So a lot of that activism basically informed me and introduced me to what I call impact corruption in many ways. Like how are we measuring impact? How are we evaluating impact? How is governance really structured? And I founded Intersectional Innovation and Impact Lab essentially to like build better system, build better tools for organizations that really cater towards the communities we are claiming to uplift. Because in America, we have more than 2 million nonprofit. Many people don't know that. And generating more than 4.1 trillion in revenue, but we still have so much inequity. So where does the money really go? And if we look into, the history of the nonprofit ecosystem in general, that exposes those gaps. That tells you these answers like foundations not foundations are not even legally allowed to give 5% of their wealth. So they act as these tax shelters for billionaires, and uh, it leads to many times further exacerbating the social health and economic inequities in our society. So it's basically that experience really brought me back to my childhood, my upbringing, how I experienced my family experienced poverty, and how despite living with limited resources, they were so welcoming to everyone. They were so eager to give back to communities. And I don't see that many times, even in people who have millions of dollars in funding to do. So essentially, that's what led me to do the work I do, and to educate people on better governance and structures in society and government. I feel like an ADHD a little bit, but I gave the answer.
I love this because it gives us a lot of insight into what the nonprofit space really is. And you're absolutely right whenever you say that it contributes to this ongoing issue. And like you said, where's the money really going? Because how many times have we heard of a CEO of a nonprofit misusing funds? How many times have we heard that? We've heard it countless numbers of times. And it's not something that is talked about very deeply at all, right? So I'm really glad that you've centered a lot of your advocacy around this because it's deeply important to understand the nonprofit industrial complex is structured like a lot of the other systems and like a lot of the other structures that the United States does have. And it's not just the United States, it's everywhere. But the United States, unfortunately, is one of the worst of all. Um, whenever you are out in the community, okay, and you're talking to people or, like meeting people at events, etc., what are you like? What are you hearing? And what I mean by what are you hearing is people on the ground. So you're in some organizing spaces, you're, organizing alongside some other people. What are you seeing as some of the issues that are being brought up in like your community?
Definitely. I feel like we are entering a very, very divisive era right now, unfortunately, a
Mhm.
division we cannot afford. Like when we think about the LGBTQ community, we say LGBTQ community, but are we really a community at this moment? Because I have experienced myself so much stigmatization and many other things from the LGBTQ community, let alone the outside, which makes me question like um, how do we function as a more unified, as a society? Like in Massachusetts, we had Fenway Health cut healthcare for trans youth, was one of the first LGBTQ institution to do that. And when young people organized a protest against it, those young people were banned from entering trans spaces. Those young people were banned from and accessing resources that nonprofits were providing. And I think it is these culture of banning each other that is really making us more divisive instead of sitting together, hearing each other with an open mind. Okay, we can disagree on 100 things, but can we come together, put our differences aside, and actually be more united in these times, because these are not the times to be united. And as trans people are entering early stages of genocide, there is a disproportionate impact this is going to have on immigrants and many other people who can't even put themselves out there. You may have noticed I just changed my Instagram name again because I am a full-time entrepreneur and I feel like I have to hide myself to make my living, and I constantly have to hide my activism, my organizing, because when I go on a client meeting or a job interview, I'm not just discriminated for being feminine, I'm also discriminated for being an activist in above all. Because one thing I've learned is that America hates activists. America hates people who are organizing, building community in a way that is really threatening to the status quo and threatening to the capitalism. So when you're opposing also capitalist structures that are causing a lot of issues to our community, I think you put a target on your back. And when you don't have generational wealth, when you don't have parents who support you, in fact, you are the opposite. You are like the breadwinner for your family. You are the breadwinner to a lot of your community. You're doing the unpaid labor as an immigrant to educate your parents, educate your khalas, educate your cousins, because you don't want to be the only one who got an education. You don't want to be the only one who who made it, who, because many people back home think they made it. They reach out to me for a lot of advice. They reach out to me for a lot of things which I've I carry the guilt that I cannot provide them because, I'm one human and I'm already involved in many things. So yeah, I think to get back to your question of what I'm hearing in the community is I'm hearing a lot of these conversations coming from financial trauma, I would say. There is one of the research I did highlighted how queer people, queer and trans people, especially intersectionally diverse people, experience extreme amount of financial trauma. So when I think about the nonprofits also suffer from financial trauma because they're constantly worried about their funding, their funders, whether those are corporate organizations or, you know, foundations. So as a result, just like I am censoring myself by changing my Instagram or hiding my activism or making my activism quote unquote like palatable to the public eye so that I can survive this economy living in this world. Nonprofits do that too. Nonprofits do that by censoring activists, by ensuring that they are working on more service level causes instead of addressing the root causes of why the issue they're working on exists to begin with. So I think these are some of the conversations I'm really, really hearing in the grassroots communities. I'm privileged enough that I'm one of the very few grassroots organizers from the LGBTQ ecosystem in Boston that is still involved because a lot of activists have come and they have depleted their capacity over the years and their work has died down because there is no monetary ways to support yourself, right? Like activism is unpaid. Nobody pays you to organize a protest or speak at a protest or a lot of even you see me, posting speaking stuff is actually a lot of them is I would call myself like I'm marketing myself. Those are not paid engagements because um, capitalism is inherently opposed to people who are speaking up. But I want to create an image that you know, I'm a, I should be, I should, my voice should be respected. Like you mentioned, you started the interview by saying, more people should hear that voice. And that is the same thing I think we as society as a missing. I wish our media was doing more justice to bringing those issues into light. I wish our media was really in solidarity with the working class communities and not with the elites and status quo, etc. So that's like a more elaborative answer to your question, but I hope that addresses it.
Yeah, it does. And I know your parents have also played a role in your advocacy as well, right?
Definitely. I would not be here today without my parents. They have sacrificed a lot. When my father, I remember first had a cycle, he would drop me on a cycle to my school, and then on a motorbike because we couldn't afford any other source of accommodation. There was no public transport that existed in connecting my high school and where I lived. And my parents worked equally hard to be where I am right now. And I did not have that perspective growing up. Growing up, in fact, I had a lot of conflicts with them because I was doing everything by myself, and I always felt I did not have parents. Um, Let me give you an example, right? Like if you want to appear in your international examinations like SAT, you need a credit card for it. My parents don't even know what a credit card is. So I have to, go educate them on what a credit card is. Can they find a relative who can give me a credit card so I can pay for? So there's a lot of things, I had to do myself, like becoming financially independent at an early age. So I always had that frustration with my parents sometimes that I took on them. But it wasn't until very recent years when our relationship really strengthened. Um, Especially when I came out using social media as a tool, it became really hard for them. They were at the forefront of hate, receiving a lot of hate and backlash in Pakistan, and they still live in Pakistan. So I remember my therapist telling me that cut off your parents because they are apparently a big source of anxiety to you. And I was, going through a really tough time. Like, should I delete my social media? Should I just be on the down low? But then I would be like, we never see Pakistani people, let alone Pakistani people from born and raised in working class background, from village background, who are doing what I do. So I took the big decision and did not delete my social media. I went against the advice of my therapist, and look where I am today. I was persistent. I did a lot of capacity building of my parents. I educated them because I put myself in their shoes. I was like, what if I did not have all this education, all this global travel? Would I be comfortable with myself? No. I feel like I would be my biggest bully because if I did not have that brain, the exposure I had due to my global travel and education and world building I did. So how can I expect my parents who have who have not done what I did, who have never even left the country, who have never gone to college, who have never seen people like me in media to expect to understand me? Um, and I think it is that culturally conscious capacity building that I did with my parents and with my aunties that I now have a very, very strong relationship with them. I don't hide things like having a partner, having a boyfriend, having a husband, or like my life with them. I am now very open with them. And I think millions of people in my community do not have that privilege, or they can't even be out because being out again has a can be have life and death consequences to you, and especially for women, right? Like my mother I feel very, very empathetic towards because she was a very smart individual. She reads, and she if she reads something, she remembers it so well. And I was like, I wish I had your brain power. And she never got a chance to go to college because when my granddad died from my mom's side, she was married. Like she wanted to go to medical school, and I feel like she could have done so much well in it, but she was married after grade 12th. So of course when she was married, her first year was really navigating the in-laws, and when I was pregnant, she had to do a lot of like unpaid labor as a married woman, and tolerate even violence from her relatives. So I feel like my mother's dreams were crushed, and um, and in Pakistani society, a lot of women suffer through that. It's not just my mother. A lot of mother internalize their trauma, and they think that their children will bring, especially if there is a male child, that male child will bring liberation to them or will bring happiness to them. And I broke that. I broke that, shattered. I was like, sorry, no male child expectations, because I did everything what a mom would expect from their boy to do. And I think that is what today establishes my relationship with them, because I empathize where they come from, but at the same time, I am asserting my values. I'm asserting like this is where I come from and this is how I do things. And again, if I was not financially independent, I would not have the privilege to have those conversations. I'm not dependent on anyone. I'm not dependent on my parents that I'm able to do these things, which again brings me back to this intersectional innovation and impact lab. Like we need more capacity building. We need more trauma informed financial literacy, financial education. So our youth is financially independent to take their own decision. They don't have to depend on a boy or a sugar daddy or a sugar mom or their own parents. They are baddies enough to go out in the world and be an entrepreneur and be whatever they want to do because they can. And if it's anyone who can be an entrepreneur, those are immigrant people, right? Like if they could, that's why I'm spending a lot of right now investment in educating communities that are often excluded from mainstream nonprofits, mainstream ecosystem. Because if an immigrant can, come all the way, start a new life from scratch, build a whole chosen family in an entirely new country, I think if that person can speak the language of status quo, can speak that, those capitalist language, like product management and many other things, they can they can outdo the doers. Like they can really, really put themselves where they don't have to work like unpaid or underpaid or being personally exploited. And that's the future I want for people from underrepresented communities, where they're liberated to live their lives on their own term.
You said a key thing, live their lives on their own terms. I love that for a lot of different reasons. And you're a shining example of that. Unafraid, unapologetic, and you bring your whole self to everything you do, which I think people see that, and you have this empathy and this caring for others that is so incredibly inspiring. So again, it is an absolute honor to sit down and talk to you. I do have to say that. Kind of jumping in a little bit and just thinking about just where you see yourself in the next couple of years. What do you see next for you? What are you currently working on? What do you see in your future? What do you hope to be doing? And just yeah, just kind of like what are you doing now?
Definitely. These are really good questions. I feel like my dreams have shifted a lot as I learned new things about the world, about systems I work. I feel like 2025 was my biggest learning. Alone in 2025, I learned more than what a college taught me, or what even a PhD could have taught me, because just living in grassroots communities, working with them, exposed me to a lot of differences. So I'm trying to figure out myself that what is really that I can do, what is I want to do, what I can really realistically do. I have a dream. My dream is that I want to be able to exist without thinking about how this constantly calculating the risks and that comes with being that person who wear heels, who wear makeup, and who shows up in spaces, because that attract a lot of violence. That has attracted a lot of violence in the last 2 3 years. So I am now reevaluating that this is what I want to do, but can I do this without putting myself in a box, without putting myself in where I have to, let's say, conform to the gender binary, or without. So, my biggest dream is basically existing still as a non binary person, being able to not having to go through the kind of survival mindset I have navigated my whole life, where not knowing, will United States be my home, or will I have to go to a different country, and how do I go to a different country? And I feel like I have been doing that for the last several years, and in the next 5 10 years, I want to be a little bit more actually in my stable era, where I have a home and I'm dedicated to really building community around me in the most sustainable way possible, and in whatever little way that looks like. It doesn't have to be the social issues I'm working on right now. It could be anything. But in the long run, I'm definitely looking for a way to get out of the survival mindset that our politics around us is imposing on us, whether that is due to anti-immigrant laws or punishing activists for speaking up, etc., etc. So I don't have a very inspiration goal. I would have given you, I could make up things, but I want to be honest. Like this is where I see. I just want to be able to survive this ecosystem in the next 10 years,
Mhm.
and survival in a way that I'm thriving and not just constantly thinking about, okay,
Absolutely.
backup options, this and risks and analysis and all of that.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I like that you say that because oftentimes the future is uncertain, right? And we're living in a really like messed up timeline right now. There's a lot happening, Jeffrey Epstein files, Congress members, being found credible for sexual assault and a number of other things. And it is very interesting to sit back and watch, and I dread waking up the next morning and looking at the headlines because I know it's going to be something else, right? And that's not normal. None of this is normal. But I mean, well, let's be clear. It is, and it's been coming for a very long time, right? This isn't something that just happened overnight. This is something that has been building up for a very long time. So, in regards to like ICE and like DHS in like your local community, there's a lot happening, right? In that arena, there's a lot happening. And, Congress has been going back and forth about funding DHS. It's been going back and forth about, fully funding ICE, having ICE at airports. What is your response to what's happening with ICE across our communities? Because obviously they're attacking the most marginalized. That's obvious. But what's your reaction to all this conversation around ICE and DHS?
Definitely. I think this has resulted in a lot of fear in our communities.
Hmm.
There is a lot of tremendous fear on life, on navigation of systems, and that fear can lead to censorship, self-censorship, self-harm, so many other things. And it also imposes a colonial mindset. It also furthers the colonial mindsets because people think if they can code switch themselves, leave their language, leave their culture, leave everything behind, and put themselves in the most packaged way to survive in the capitalist system, they can succeed. And they're not wrong. Actually, sometimes hiding your ethnic name does leads to, especially in this automated world where people are now, everybody's using AI. AI is deployed everywhere. We have seen research study come out that AI system constantly discriminate against ethnic names. So I feel like there is just a lot of fear in our communities, and that's where um, the nonprofit ecosystem can really jump in and can really do that multilingual, culturally conscious outreach that is really, really missing in our society. People think that they're posting an English flyer on social media and that is accessible to immigrant communities. No. People who are doing so much underpaid, undervalued work, survival work, they don't have time, many time to use that social media. They don't even understand the way we communicate activism, the way we communicate policy. So they cannot even distinguish between misinformation and legitimate sources, between fear that sometimes, because there are many sources of activism, right? Like one activism is really going after um, in the most extreme way possible. And some activism is, providing resources, providing healthcare, providing economic mobility and other things. So people are really struggling to find their niche. I I have I served as a fellow for City of Boston, where with the immigrant advancement department, I have constantly been working with immigrant communities, and I feel very welcome and accepted by them. Again, because of this culturally conscious approach I follow, I feel like my queerness has never been a source of that. Why are you like this? In fact, I feel like I feel the most accepted in immigrant communities today as a femme person because they they empathize with this, but those communities not reflected or not included in many times in the services that nonprofits are providing, getting millions of dollars to do so, right? Like if you want to help immigrant communities, or if anybody wants to help immigrant communities, the first thing they many times want to do is donate to a nonprofit. But whether that nonprofit's impact is reaching that community is a question. Mayor Wu just announced $3 million in safety net grants because she wants to help um, immigrant communities. But will those grants actually benefit the immigrant community in any way? Are the people advocating for immigrant communities, are the immigrants themselves? Is there even a single immigrant in their board of directors? Is there a single immigrant in their leadership? So like it is all of these like ethical questions that comes. Is that comes with governance issues that people are talking about. And I feel like our immigrant communities is not stupid. Like they know these issues, they are talking about it, but they don't, many of them don't have the capacity to put themselves out there, organize. Like I wanted to curate more like refugee people, especially there are three trans refugees that live in my building. I reached out to two of them, have that coffee chat with them. Like, would you want to be like board of directors for my organization? They said they can't, they never want to, no matter how much I assure their picture name will never be out. I will use the most private channels. They're not comfortable. They are scared. They are afraid that putting themselves out can make themselves a target. And That makes me afraid. One of them is a trans refugee who is an Uber driver. I'm afraid for her because she doesn't have an college degree and she is an AI, and automated driving is coming. So what will happen to immigrant jobs a few years from now? Like that is constantly a worry for me as like digitalization, automated bias, and that sector is really, really fast forwarding, and our activist communities are not really talking as much about it as possible because they will the community that will be the most impacted at the end will be some of the most marginalized, like trans refugees, queer refugees, and displaced people of the global south and global majority in general. And we have a lot of them in America. We have created a lot of displaced people, and we have a lot of displaced people from all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And people come to the United States supposedly for a better life, it's not even just like really for a better life. It's just like the fear of persecution, right? And it's so, oh God, I get emotional talking about this and hearing you talk about it literally shatters my heart to the extent where it's like I just want to be this person that platforms the voices that don't get platformed by our corporate and mainstream media because they're complicit in silence. How many times have they covered, the protests going on across the country, other than like the No Kings protests, which don't get me wrong, they have been very well attended, and there's been a lot of, work going around that, but it needs to go a lot further than that. We need a general strike, right? We need to hit them exactly in their capitalist hearts, hit them exactly where it hurts. And how do you attack a capitalist? You take away their capital. You take away that money, right? So, and I say this as a democratic socialist, and there's a lot of movement going on around the country. Looking back at the elections, Zohran Mamdani wins New York City. I felt a sense of hope because it's like, okay, if Zohran can win in New York City, and then seeing a Democratic Socialist win on the Georgia City or a Atlanta City Council, and then the Seattle mayor winning her election, who's also Democratic Socialist. So there's a lot of like work going on, right? So I guess my question would be, and we'll wrap up here shortly, but what inspires you to keep pushing forward? I already know the answer to this, but I want you to emphasize on what keeps you motivated? What keeps you going? What inspires you?
Definitely. Uh, 2025 put me in a really, really dark space that I had to go on a lot of reflection. 2024, 2025 was a lot of reality check for me. And I know for many people, it radicalized us in ways that I can speak for myself. Like I never thought about systems intersecting in this way and producing harms in these ways. So I had to go back from like, why am I here? Like, why am I in this country? Like, why do I actually not just go back to Pakistan? And I think it was that dream that, okay, my parents have lived such a tough life and I want to build for them. I want to provide for them. My aunties who work so hard in Pakistan to make a living, their husbands don't do a shit and put violence on them. So those are the people that inspire me and keep me going and wants me to build a better world. My cousins who have mental health issues and don't have mental health resources, that gives me hope, that gives me inspiration because they need that. All children around the world need mental health resources. That is so really, really going back to my roots is what gives me hope. That's why I was like, okay, let's put the survival mode aside and put gift my parents with their first international trip. And I took them to Saudi Arabia last year because in the Muslim world, uh, that's one thing they dream of. Like if they can do the Umrah that is like a big thing. So I was like, I'm going to gift that to my parents, and I'm going to make their dream come true. And that built my capacity as an activist so much that when I came back to America, I was like, okay, enough of people pleasing, enough of this, enough of that. I am going to not, I have proved myself over and my values, my things. And I think if I have to code switch to survive at the moment, I will do that. But that does not mean I I have to constantly do what I'm doing. And I think that became the source of my inspiration and my hope. So as I look forward, I think I'm seeing joy in the working class communities everywhere. Like their children, they do so much hard work. It is that hard work that they do, and that hard work not being compensated, not being valued, and being exploited is a constant source of hope and inspiration to me that they deserve better, and that they need people need to be fighting for them. People need to be fighting for the working class communities. And I think that builds my capacity automatically that, okay, no matter how you present yourself outwards, even if my Instagram is all about just like pretty pictures and fashion, what I do in the community is matters most, and that does not need to be on social media. That is how I'm like viewing at least the next few couple months.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. I also appreciate this conversation because this has been very eye-opening for me too. And I want to invite you back on the podcast anytime that you have anything that you'd like to amplify or anything you want to talk about or anything you want shared, because we can have many conversations, my friend, because you inspire the living hell out of me to continue pushing forward. And the energy that you bring to the table is so incredibly inspiring. And I want to say thank you again for, allowing me to amplify your voice. And, obviously, like I said, you have an open invite anytime you want to come on the podcast, collaborate with us on post. How can people follow you on social media and uplift the work that you are currently doing?
That's a good question. I feel like I change my name all the time, but my name is Burhan. My legal name is Muhammad Burhan, and I used to give workshops on Burhan underscore rebels, like becoming Burhan underscore rebels, because that actually became a thing back in 2021 that led to Meta banning my account permanently. So that's my main account, and right now the account of my venture is intersectional underscore innovation. So you can follow that. But I'm happy to, get connected, collaborate on anything that people find meaningful, governance related, etc.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom, sharing your voice, and bringing the energy. I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. Thank you for all the work you are doing. You are inspiring me. You are the hope for me. So thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.